you. Hi. This side's awake, this side's not. Just being aware. Oh, wait, picture. Okay. I don't know what it is. Every time I do a speech, and I already see a couple of you with phones out too. Every time people get me a picture, and they're, wait, don't take it yet. Don't take it. Because they always get me doing this. And this is on my picture on Twitter all the time. So before you're going to do it, all right, you're going to take a couple of pictures. Let's do it right. Okay? This is me pointing. This is me being thoughtful about a question. This is me being no, don't do that one. Anyway, all right, so I'm glad to be here today. It's great to be here. This is a fantastic conference. It's one that I look forward to coming to every year. Kelly and Sal and everybody does such a great job. So to get to talk to you a little bit today, it's an honor. Now, I hope that I'll be able to give you some good information. I'm going to tell you before I get into this a whole lot that my talk today is a little different than some of the things you guys have experienced so far. Part of this is, this is the STEM Leadership Alliance. So a leadership is a big deal for me. I've spent a career trying to help focus science education, to try to provide policymakers with good information, and most importantly, to support teachers. And something we don't do a great job of in education in general is prepare our teachers to be the leaders that they need to be to really help change. So some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, there may even be a part of the presentation where you start going, I'm not real sure how this part relates to STEM. Trust me, don't leave me during that time. Stay with me and you're going to see. But part of what I wanted to talk about today is how does integrated STEM really connect to the real world? But also the subtext of this is how can you use some of the stuff we're going to talk about today to talk to people who are making decisions, whether it be legislators, governors, principals, and superintendents. What can you do to really help them see that we need to do change? Because, gang, I got news for you. We do. We need some change. So I'm going to ask a question. Now, those of you who have heard me speak before, you're not allowed to say this out loud, okay? I've already warned the Kentucky folks that, you're going to hear some jokes they've already heard before. And if you've heard me speak, you probably know this. Who knows why we teach high school science, biology, chemistry, and physics? The real reason. See, everybody's afraid to raise their hand right now. It's alphabetical. Who said that? Well done. Did you cheat? Have you heard me talk about this before? Okay, good. Yeah, the Committee of 10 back in 1873 decided that the U.S. was going to be the only country who actually breaks chemistry, physics, and biology up. By the way, they don't even mention earth science because, we only live here. So why would we worry about that a whole lot? Besides, we're going to have the kids who aren't real good at science take the earth science because it's not as complicated. Well, I guess we could talk about the fact that we had 90-degree weather in Alaska this week. So there's some complicated things around Earth. So thinking about how things have changed and the fact that we're living with 300 years worth of history means that we can't just simply go into a group and say, hey, we need to make change. You actually need to go in and speak their language. So I'm going to try to do that a little bit. So first of all, I want to talk about integrated STEM. What is it? I'm actually going to skip over that part because I didn't set up the poll everywhere in time. So here, I want you to take a look at this screen. Punctuation matters. It does. I think most people think about the second word as opposed to the first word. What's a period supposed to do? Ends a thought. So how have we taught STEM in schools for many years? Well, the student goes to science on the science hall. Then they go and take a technology and or engineering course on another hall, and then they do math. I remember when I was teaching ninth graders, which I love teaching ninth graders. I remember this one kid, Brandon. And Brandon was a smart aleck, but I like smart alecks because I'm a smart aleck. And he says, and we were calculating heat. And he raised his hand, and he said, now, he was being a smart aleck, but he was also making a point. He raised his hand. Now, I coach cross country and track. So he said, Coach, that looks a lot like math. I said, yeah. He said, I'm in the wrong class. It's 10 o'clock. Now, as it turned out, whenever we would do the reverse schedule, because every now and then they'd flip the schedule, my second period I had him. Well, his fifth period was math. And so when you did the reverse, they actually ended up coinciding. So he said, are we on reverse schedule today? Because this is science class. I said, yeah, well, we need science, we need the math to help explain the science. And he couldn't understand that. And I said, son, you got to be able to do the math because you can't get a job just doing even numbers. Math teachers don't get mad at me right off the bat. It was a joke. And he said, and so we had to talk about the fact that these things have to come together. Well, it would have been better if we had used commas instead of periods. Because then at least we could start talking about STEM in the way that it really works in the real world. You can design the one everybody uses, the toothpick bridge, design the bridge. You can see how much weight it will hold. That doesn't mean that you've done STEM. What that means is that you played with glue and wood, and you've seen how much it would hold. But did you actually engage the student in the science and engineering practice of constructing an argument or a model? Did you actually think about using patterns in mathematics and in others and have the student actually explain why they designed the bridge the way they did? Did you have the students, did you give them some type of budget where they had to discuss the trade-offs that they had to make? Did they actually talk about the forces that were acting at different places of stress on the bridge? So if they did all of that as one big thing and they were able to use all of that to discuss why the bridge broke when it did or why the bridge held as much as it did, that's a different way of thinking about STEM than I built a bridge, I put books on it, it held 4, it broke. Right? So integrated STEM is so much more. You can do things with, y'all just got through doing robotics. And yes, it's just fantastic to come up after y'all have gotten to play. Because, now everybody's focused on the play. Well, the playing is important. I actually believe that we need to let kids play more. But constructive play, meaning that there's not the periods between the letters, means that you're not just doing the robot or you're not just doing whatever it is you're doing for an engineering exercise without also talking about the ramifications for science and math. I believe that we have to reimage STEM. I think that we have to rethink how we are approaching it in our schools. We have to really think about the fact that when we think about STEM, it's more than the academic part of STEM. So everybody thinks STEM, they automatically go to health fields, they go to engineering, they talk about maybe architecture, but actually there's so much more to STEM than just that. And understand where I'm coming from. Now, I'm a former science teacher. I have a degree, actually 2 degrees in chemistry. I love chemistry. I love it. Nobody loves good stoichiometry like I do. Give me a good equation to balance. And don't even get me started with Le Chatelier and the good old Henderson-Hasselbalch buffer equation. It's just fun to say Henderson-Hasselbalch because most people don't know what it is. I will tell you this. If you're ever presenting before a state board of education or legislative body, say the word stoichiometry or Henderson-Hasselbalch, you will be dismissed. They will not ask you to testify anymore. So whenever I got tired of testifying, I would throw one of those words in. They'd say, thank you, Dr. Pruitt, you can go have a seat. Now, I love that. But you know what I didn't do well now that I look back on it, is connect that always to why kids needed to know that. What jobs were out there? Because the job, ultimately, everything we do prepares kids for the workforce, whether we want to admit that or not. Now, for some kids, it's after 4 years of college. For some kids, though, it's right after school. So I think we have to re-image this because, see, we've had this kind of idea in public schools and that we have to prepare students for everything. And actually, we have to get out of that. We're not preparing kids for everything. We should prepare them for anything, which means we teach them how to think. We teach them how to problem solve. We teach them how to be lifelong learners because of what I'm going to show you here in a few minutes. Now, not this, but this is actually a nice story. So this is my desk at SREB. You can see my name there. I put this on my desk because I learned a really important lesson in Henderson County, Kentucky. When I was Commissioner of Education, I was out visiting, and I went to Henderson County, and there was a young man who was dying for me to come down to the welding lab. I mean, he just couldn't wait. And they finally got me down there, and he was so excited. He said, oh, good, you're here. Here, come here. Push this button. I said, dude, I'm from the South. Do you know how many jokes start with push this button? He said, no, really. So I pushed it. He had designed that into a plasma welder. So when I pushed the button, it started to cut my name. Now, the way we've thought about education is math happens on the math hall, science happens on the science hall, CTE happens on the CTE hall. And those things don't need to come together because, especially, sometimes with those CTE kids, they're there because they're not really good at the other stuff. Now, that's not true, so nobody tweet that I just said that part. But that's been the perception. So let me tell you about the conversation that ensued while we're waiting on my name to be cut. Now, I want you to look at it. This wasn't a simple cut. I mean, he's even got angles on the D. There's the little holes in the R's and the P's. I said, so tell me, how long does it take you to do that? He said, oh, well, the hardest part is coding it. Coding. So you actually have to code the machine. He said, yeah. He said, but that part ends up being about half an hour. He said, but I've got to do all the calculations first. I said, so talk to me about that. He said, well, it's on an XY coordinate plane. I'm like, whew. He said XY coordinate plane. I'm like fired up, man. I'm like, yeah, okay. He's like, it's on an XY coordinate plane, and so I have to calculate the angles and the lengths and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, that's awesome. I bet you love math. I hate math. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm not good at it. The kid had just explained trigonometry to me, folks. I mean, he's having to calculate angles. He's having to calculate where to put the little holes in the R. He's having to calculate circumference. He's having all this stuff. He's not good at math. I said, you just explained to me half of a trig course. He said, no, I did what I had to do to make this part. And you know what? It changed how I thought about the world a little bit because as a chemist, science ruled the day and it was about the science. But y'all, that may be why we've lost so many kids in science. It may be why we've lost so many kids in math. I personally did not like math growing up. Now, my PhD is in analytical chemistry. So there's a little math in there. But it wasn't until I started taking some of those courses, it's like, oh, the quadratic equation matters. It's not just a song. Minus B, trust me, I won't sing because it's been too recently since you ate. But yeah, so it kind of changed how we had to think about things. Now, there's some key factors I think we have to address. I think we have to address equity, first and foremost, all the time, every day, which means that we're giving kids opportunities in these courses and we're supporting them properly. Take a look at your regulations in your schools and your states. A great example is dual credit. A lot of states are doing dual enrollment. But if your regulations were written 10 years ago, there's a fair chance that you're not really getting an equitable opportunity for all kids. Because the times were different, the people making the decisions were different, and they probably didn't have an eye toward ensuring equity. So we have to provide that equitable opportunity for everybody. Second thing is we need to start focusing more on student interest and aptitude. Aptitude here is often left out. You have to think about what are kids interested in, but also what do they have the ability to do. The thing is, though, if you don't focus on equity, aptitude will end up messing up. Because what happens is if you lead with aptitude and you don't lead with support, then you actually end up not identifying as many kids to be able to do as many wonderful things as they're able to do. We've got to have a better career focus. I think in general, when we think about STEM, we've got to do more. Welding is a STEM field. Advanced manufacturing is a STEM field. It is. Healthcare is a STEM field. You go, well, of course it is. You got to take science. Let me tell you something. You got to take science and math and all of those if you're going to really teach kids to be lifelong learners, because that's where the problem solving comes in. We've got to blur the lines between traditional academia and career and technical education and start, like I said, preparing kids for anything, not trying to prepare them for everything. Having a focus is important. And we have to be able to address partnerships. Giving kids an opportunity to go out and do work, internships, but also having businesses come and help us. You know, as an educator, I wasn't aware of all the different jobs that you could do, even in chemistry. I knew a lot, but I didn't know enough. I also know that it's difficult because we speak a different language than business. One of the things that we did in Kentucky is we want to do a lot more with apprenticeships. And we had a lot of our businesses say, hey, we can't have kids that are under 18 in our factories. Or we can't have kids that are under 18 in our workplaces because of liability. Well, so we went to ADECO and said, ADECO is an unemployment agency, and did a statewide contract with them and said, well, would you hire our kids and then place them in these businesses? There's a way around those things if you really just come to the table with a willingness to make those change. So why is integrated STEM so critical to our future? Now, some of you know that I've had this secret desire my whole career to eliminate warning labels from products. That's one of the big reasons I believe that STEM education and science education is important. Because if we could teach more people to know that when you buy a cup of hot coffee, that it's actually hot. Or, like on the plane when I was coming here, when it said, and they gave me the bag of peanuts, and it said, caution, contains peanuts. Thank goodness I was unaware. The fact that those things go up in the front windshield of cars to keep the heat out, you know what it says on the back of most of them? Take down before driving. Thank goodness. I can't see where I'm going, but man, I'm cool. Or in a pack of stereo equipment, they get that little white packet. What's it say? Do not eat. Did y'all ever buy stereo equipment thinking there might be something to eat in there? Oh, look, speakers and chiclets. And one of my favorites, of course, is Preparation H. Do not eat. And you know it's because somebody wrote a letter. Dear Preparation H, I've eaten a whole tube, and I still have those hemorrhoids. My mouth is so small, I can't even eat a jelly bean, but I can whistle really well. I mean, the logic of some of these things, this is on the side of a safe. Do not store the key in the safe. Whew, that would be a tough one. Thank you for this one. Remove the child before washing. I don't even know what to think about this one. What kind of hygiene problem does somebody have that they got to put in a garment? Hey, don't forget, they got this thing back there. You got to take care of that. I got to tell you, these warning labels is why we got to help kids learn to think more. And I learned a new one last week. I got a whole new mission now for integrated STEM. This is more than science. This is truly a STEM issue. Dentists. Oh, yeah. We have sonar that can read the depths of the ocean. We have satellites that can read masses of air. But they still use those dang iron hooks. And they're going to poke me to tell me how much they can go into my gum to tell me. I'm like, you don't have a machine that can read the depth of my gums without stabbing me? My favorite was I broke a tooth last week. It's a broken tooth. It's pretty obvious. She said, I'm going to put some cold on here to see if it hurts. Raise your hand if it hurts. I raised my hand. She said, I haven't touched it yet. I said, you don't have to. It's going to hurt. It's a broken tooth. Now, I can understand if it was, just hurting. It's a broken tooth. So I hope that in integrated STEM someday we can create a generation of people who can figure out how to do dentistry, not based on the principle of how bad can I hurt you before we save your teeth. So, seriously about the future we face, though. We have changes in the demands of the workforce. The realities of the need for an educated, balanced, and prepared society are going to override everything that we do. What are these changes in the workforce? Well, we've been talking about robotics, artificial intelligence, and automation for a long time. This next part, I want to tell you how far we have let this come and what we are facing if we don't do something different. This is actually going to be an issue that affects adults, but it particularly affects how we approach K-12. So what a lot of people ask, same question we've been asking for a long time. Will there be enough jobs? That's not the question to ask. See, we don't have the worry of robots kicking us out. That's the idea. Okay, well, all these robots are going to kick everybody out of the jobs. No. Actually, the issue is, will there be enough people with the skills to fill new jobs? Because, yeah, we're going to have more automation, but that actually creates a whole middle skill level of job. But if we don't rethink how we're doing this, if we don't reapproach how we think about STEM, then what happens is we don't have the people who can fill these jobs. Now, you can teach people a skill. That means you're teaching them a job. The question is, are we preparing people for a career? Meaning that they're able to think, and they're able to progress through their career. So here's where we are. Now, a lot of this is done in the South. Southern Regional Education Board, this is a paper we did called Unprepared and Unaware, where we looked at 25 to 35-year-olds who think they have great jobs because they're making money, they've got their house, they're going on vacations, but those folks have a high school diploma, and those jobs are going to go away over the next 10 years. See, because at least 30% of our work activities and 60% of the jobs are automatable. One of the things that's interesting is respiratory therapists, technicians rather, they're gradually being replaced. I mean, and that actually has some post-secondary training. But if you've been to a McDonald's lately, have you noticed that you're ordering on an iPad now? In Minnesota, they're already trying robots to do the fries. Actually kind of made me think of, if you've seen Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, that there's the scene where he's mopping through the back and Louis Anderson is washing lettuce, and he says, hey, so you're doing cleanup. See, I'm washing lettuce. Soon, I'm going to be moving to fries. And then assistant general manager, and that's where the big bucks are. Here's the reality. At that time in history in the 80s, that might have been a progression. But those jobs are going away. 5% of jobs are completely automatable, and 23 to 44% of work activities may be automated by 2030. So what does that mean for us? So let's look at what's happened since or during and since the recession. So if you had a high school diploma, there were 7.3 million jobs lost at the end of the recession in 2010. Since then, they've added 8 million jobs. If you had an associate degree or some college, which includes some type of certification, there was a loss of 300,000 and an add of 1.2 million. Over the course, people with college degrees, there were 4 million added jobs. Now, I want to be real clear about something, so everybody hear me on this. This is not me saying every kid needs to go to college, okay? This is not evidence you should use that every kid should go to college. This is simply job data. I think that we should be prepared to realize that college sometimes is not always the answer. It doesn't mean it's not the answer, and we as adults shouldn't be the one making that decision. In fact, if they were, I can tell you that Dr. Pruitt would not be standing here today. I was told in high school by my high school counselor, see, I was bussed in. We were under desegregation rules, and I was a county kid. I was bussed into the city to go to school. Now, my grades were good. I had a dad who was a pharmacist, a mom who was a science teacher. I came from a home that had 2 college graduates. But yet my counselor said, Stephen, college just may not be the right thing for you. Maybe you should consider just finding a good trade. Okay? Well, how I wish she were alive today. I would love to go give her my business card. I would love for her to see the doctorate. I would love for her to see that I'm actually over a pretty big organization. But the issue is she was trying to make a decision for me that wasn't right for me. We do that to kids all the time. That's why I say stop preparing them for everything and prepare them for anything, but let the kid make those decisions. So let's look at this by employment loss and gain. This is actually about people. 5.6 million people lost their jobs that had high school diplomas or less during the recession. Only 80,000 people gained those jobs back since. What did business do during the recession when they started having to lose people? They invested in research and development. So they found a way to do those jobs without those people. Middle skill, they have some college. 1.8 million people lost jobs, but there were 3.1 million that have gained since the end of the recession. And again, if you had a bachelor's degree or higher, 8.4 million people gained jobs. So what does that mean? So you had a net gain of 8.6 million versus a net loss of 4.8 million. Now, all that sounds pretty bad. Well, let me tell you, it's going to get worse. The declining low-skilled jobs, which are a high school diploma or less, incomes below the poverty line, and they tend to be physical and repetitive labor. The push toward middle skill, though, is going to be more than a high school diploma, but less than a bachelor's degree. Middle level incomes between $35,000 and $75,000, and the projected job growth is 52% between 2014 and 2024. That's a pretty significant change. In the SREB region, 41% of adults had no education beyond high school. So that is from Delaware. Yes, Delaware is a southern state. You don't have to laugh like that. We consider them southern because they're part of the SREB, but they are above the sweet tea line. I will grant you that. There is a line through Virginia that you can buy sweet tea below the line, but you cannot buy sweet tea above the line in restaurants. And for those of you who aren't sure what sweet tea is, it is the absolute fantastic manifestation of a supersaturated solution. Oh, it just makes my heart happy. Anyway, so from Delaware down to Florida, over to Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kentucky, and back up. 41% of adults do not have an education past high school. 21 million had a high school credential and no more. 6 million had some high school, and 3 million had less than a 9th grade education. See, here's the thing. Your parents' educational attainment and your educational attainment and your skill level and your child's skill level, all those are related. In fact, we found that when we did this research, and some of this is not new, other people have done it, but what we did was we also looked at the ages of their kids. We found that their kids are 10 times more likely to go into the same job that their mom and dads had. So think about this. Mom and dad are going to lose their job by 2030. Guess what happens around 2030 for all the kids that these adults have? Guess what they're doing? They're graduating high school. If they thought they were going to do the same thing mom and dad were doing because mom and dad were making a decent living, now not only are mom and dad not employable, the children are not employable. You see, children born into these families, we know this. They hear 30 million words less. They're 10 times more likely to go into the low-skilled jobs. If I go too fast and you need me to go back to a slide, I can. Go back? Okay. Oh, there's only 2 buttons. One's green and one's red. Oh, okay, good. Sometimes a red button, again, when you're from the South, don't push red buttons because you never know. All right, we good? See, here's the thing. We're staring at a multi-generational cliff. What we're looking at is the job force changing so much that what happens is mom and dad are losing their jobs, and they're not losing them with the prospect of getting something else. That's a key piece. This isn't about unemployment. This is about being unemployable. You understand that difference? That's a big deal. So if the kids aren't any more prepared, and we haven't changed how we thought about integrated STEM, those kids are going to go into the same type of work. And see, here's the tension. And this is what legislators face all the time. How do you prepare for today and tomorrow? So you got all these employers that are coming saying, I need these workers right now. And you know what they love to do? They love to fix K-12. Right? I mean, because education's a great thing to fix. Now, I'm not sure we always need fixing. I think a lot of times we need to expand and let some people do their jobs. I think we need to oftentimes give them more support. But we need to figure out how to help policymakers balance the realities of there are people who need work now and tomorrow. And see, right now, we're in a particularly challenging place. Unemployment in the U.S. is among the lowest it's ever been. So how do you convince people that we have to change how we do things? Especially when they're hearing, and all of us have heard it, businesses saying they don't have what we need for right now. So our job is in K-12 is to actually help these kids when they graduate, if they're going to go into those jobs, at least go in those jobs prepared to be able to evolve in those jobs. See, if states and industry leaders don't act now, here's what's going to happen. They're going to be facing underemployment or unemployment, earning incomes below the poverty level. There's going to be more dependence on social welfare services, and they're going to be unable to launch the next generation. What does that mean exactly? Here's what it means. In the South, just in the SREB states, we're predicting 18 million workers, plus their children, could be unemployable. Again, not unemployed, unemployable. It means they can't get a job because they don't have the skills. That's horrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Here's the part that is really scary to me, though. By 2030, And this is a United States statistic. For every 53 dependent people in the U.S., 53 dependents meaning people on both ends of the spectrum, the new generation coming, but also the older generation that'll be leaving at some point. No offense. There will be 47 working age adults to provide for them. So for the first time by 2030, there are more dependents than there are people in the workforce to provide for them. So that means that people that are working and their Social Security is going to support the generation that just retired. The people who are working, who are able to provide property taxes and the other things to help public schools keep going. Think about what happens. If this is the statistic, and we have 18 million unemployable adults, not to mention if we have their students. I mean, even if you assume that for the 18 million that there was one child for the 18 million, you're looking at a huge number of unemployable people. That means that shrinks the number of working age to support the dependents. And we've seen that as an ongoing thing. In 2017, you can see these percentages. The working age is there in the orange. And it becomes a really horrifying thing. Now, at this point, some of you are going, what in the world are you talking about? Why does this have anything to do with STEM? If you're going to be a STEM leader, you have to go and explain to people why STEM matters. But here's the thing. If you didn't grow up as a science, technology, engineering, or math person, how many people you think listen to you? If you go talk to them for the simple case of making a STEM. Y'all, I'm a former commissioner of education. Do you know how many times a day I had somebody telling me what I should do? Oh my gosh, you would not believe. And the stuff is amazing what people will come tell you. I had a lady when I was in Georgia. I don't know what her real name was. I called her the folic acid lady. She called me at 10:30 every Friday for about 3 months because we were doing our new science standards, and she wanted folic acid in the standards. And I said, okay, what about folic acid do you want in the standards? It's important. I'm all for women's health. I get it. But how is that in the big picture? And all it was folic acid. And it would be a 30-minute call, and she would hammer me with the same facts every Friday at 10:30. I mean, I would wait for it. I can't have a meeting. I got folic acid lady. She's calling me in about 15 minutes. I got to be at my phone. And that's the way policymakers, though, have to deal with. We are constantly barraged with a bunch of people having their thing. If you really want to help move this along and you want to help avoid those things that we saw, then you need to use those things to speak to people. Because right now, I can tell you, every governor of every state that's represented here, workforce is a priority. I can tell you the legislature in all of your states, workforce is a priority. But if you go talk to them about the importance of science, they're not really going to hear it. I mean, I was the lead for NGSS, and I talked about NGSS a lot. But when I talked to policymakers, do you think I led with NGSS? You know what I led with? Workforce. So when we have to discuss that, we have to really think about how we communicate it. This is something we don't do a great job of. We don't do a great job of preparing our teachers to go out and communicate about STEM. So here's a few things. This is a few parting ideas I'd like to share with you. Communication dues. Introductions and thank yous matter. If you go and testify somewhere, you should always go up and say, thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Madam Chair, thank you, committee, thank you, state board, whatever. That matters. In fact, I guess this is appropriate since we're standing here near Universal Studios. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I mean, so much so that when I had to get readers, I actually Googled half moon spectacles. And actually, I have them. I wear my Dumbledore readers. I love Harry Potter. So actually, I have a hypothesis about how you have to approach state boards and legislatures. It's called the hippogriff theory. And the way you have to approach a hippogriff is you go and you make eye contact, and you don't break eye contact, and you bow with your palms up. And you do not move until the hippogriff bows its head. That's how you actually have to treat these folks. Because, and I'm not saying it to be ugly about it, but it is a show of respect. And it matters. You need to know your environment and know your audience. You need to know, I'm going to turn on the microphone. You need to know how people react to you. If most of the people you're speaking to are business people, don't show up in flip-flops. I mean, I'm not being ugly. I love flip-flops. Now, sometimes the wrong people wear them, but flip-flops are fine. They're not fine at a legislative meeting or at a state board meeting. You actually have to think about the people. It's the one time in your life that you do really have to think about, what are people going to perceive me as? You got to be confident. You got to go in and know that you are a teacher. And by God, you know better than anybody else what's better for your kids. I'll talk about the opposite of that in just a second. You need to be focused and stay on point regardless of distractions. Because they will ask you questions in the middle of your speech. They will do all kinds of stuff. And you've got to be able to stay on point. Communication don'ts. Disrespect the audience in action or word. If you do anything that makes them uncomfortable or that it looks like you're disrespecting them, and actually, folks, there are some people who get offended by flip-flops. That's why you don't do it. Don't lose your composure. I don't mean this to be bad, but do you know how many times I've sat at a state board meeting and had people cry? At some point, and people get emotional, and that's fine. But if you're testifying for the fourth or fifth time in 4 or 5 months and you're still crying, go practice. Practice your thing where you're not going to be that way, because at some point you start going, as the policymaker, you start thinking, how is this an act? Or is this that person's really that passionate? The only way to overcome that is if you know that's going to be a problem, and you need to get to know the people you're presenting to so they know you, so they know that that's a genuine thing. And finally, don't diminish your position. We are educators, and we need to be proud of that. The worst thing that happens in all these things, when somebody says the words, well, I'm just an educator. Oh my gosh. You haven't just diminished your position, you've diminished the entire profession that we are. No, you go to the table and you say, I am an educator. I am a teacher. Hashtag never just. Because I am here to give voice to my children. I am here to stand in the archway between I can and I can't, between ignorance and knowledge, and between impossible and impossible. And I am the one who's going to carry that message. But when you diminish your position by saying I'm just, you hurt the whole group. Last thing, Kelly, I promise. When you're thinking about your communication, use what I call the message triangle. Think about what your main message is. You got 3 minutes to give it. What is it you're going to say? What are your 3 supporting points? And one of your points can't be because it's good for kids. It's a shame to say that. But everybody says it's good for kids. Why is it good for kids? Is there a report that says it's good for kids? Is there an expert that says it's good for kids? You got to say more. Always remember introduction. Always remember a big picture connection, because that's the other part. If folic acid lady could have connected that to something else, I might have been able to help think about that. But when there's so much coming at me all the time, I have to think about, how does this fit in the big picture? You need to be the communicator that helps make that connection for the policymaker. And finally, Who are the people you know that can help get to the people you need to make a decision? That's what that asset connection is. So, what's the big picture with integrated STEM? We need to change how we think about it. We need to connect it to the realities of future workforce. And we have to be really good at communicating it. Did you notice what I just did there? That was my message triangle. That way, you stay on point at all times. Folks, thank you so much for being here and for giving me a chance to talk to you. I hope you have a great rest of your meeting.